What's going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday. I'm back for another draft edition of the Barking Brown Show. I'm your host, Solo, today. Again, Jacob at Richism13 on Twitter. We are brought to you, as always, by our awesome friends over at Homage Apparel and Underdog Fantasy. But Homage has the best gear in the brand, softest, durable, long-lasting, looks very vintage. It's great stuff. I'll put a link to Homage down in the description below. I have all kinds of Homage. My favorite hoodie is an Homage hoodie. I like to sleep in the shirts because they're incredibly comfortable. So check them out. The best in the business. They've got, your Browns covered, the Guardians, the Cavs, the Ohio State Buckeyes. They got all of them covered for you. So you can go over and check those guys out. All right, guys. So for today's episode, I wanted to pop in here a little bit midweek. I didn't do a live Barking Browns yet this week, so I had some things I wanted to talk about. So I hopped on here, and I want to talk to you guys about 5 late-round draft targets for the Cleveland Browns. These are guys that I think will go on day 3. So some of these are 4th-round guys. Some are border 3rd round, depends on who you talk to, but I have a 4th or 5th-round grade on them. And some of them are 5th, 6th-round targets as well. So we're talking about some guys that after the household names, so to speak, have gone that you should know for your Cleveland Browns, because I think they could turn into very good and serviceable NFL players. And we're going to start with Payne Durham, the tight end from Purdue. Payne Durham is a guy that Corey Kennan talked on, my editor over at Browns Wire, talked about him with Devin, his co-host of the Draft on Daft podcast, which you should check out if you haven't already. Do a great job over there. They brought him up in their Senior Bowl episode and talking about how he had a very successful Senior Bowl and some of the things that he showed, which caused them to go back and look at the tape. And I did the same thing. And Payne Durham is a really fun tight end prospect. He's got great size. He's over 250 pounds, 6'6". He's either 6'5" or 6'6". He's in that range. He's a heck of a blocker. That's what's going to step out on film first and foremost. He struggles sometimes with his hand placement, but if he can get his hands on the whoever he's trying to block, he has the strength, in technique to do well, with the exception of some of his hand placement, which is something that you're like, okay, so he's got a good overall technique, just struggles a little bit sometimes. And sometimes he'll overextend and not extend his arms out and try to just body them, and they'll slip by him, and some things like that Bill Callahan can fix, right? So that's what I look at when I think about some of these things, is like, okay, he comes to Cleveland. Do we have the ability to coach him on the areas that he struggles? In Payne Durham's case, yeah. I mean, Bill Callahan can coach him up at the tight end. He could coach Jacoby Brissett to throw a pancake block. I think he can coach that, But the best thing about Payne is he's not overly fast and explosive off the line of scrimmage. That's why he's not going to be, on day 1 or day 2 of the draft. But his long speed, there's a little bit more wiggle in his hips than I thought. There was a couple reps on tape where he just ran like a vertical route, a go route, and he was matched up against a linebacker, and he got behind him. I mean, there's some long speed there. His acceleration is slow. His feet are kind of slow, but, that causes him to fall. But I think the biggest thing is he is a check down safety blanket. He understands how to find the hole in the zone, settle down in it, and give his quarterback an option. Sometimes he's running, like I said, some go routes and some deep routes and things like that, but a bunch of hook and curl routes where he just gets open. It's 3rd and 4. He runs a 6-yard route, settles in there, grabs it. He can break some tackles with his big size and strength and some things like that to be impressive. And I was surprised. I really, really want to see how he tests, but his numbers, he was in an abysmal. I mean, I was watching this game, and some of the quarterback play in for Payne Durham that he had to deal with this year is some of the worst quarterback play I ever saw. And I think some of that might have held him back. So I think Payne Durham is a name. You get into the 4th, 5th round, and the Browns have 4 picks and 4 picks between the 4th and 5th round. I think Payne Durham could end up being one of those, and I think he's definitely a name to watch later on. A guy I've been high on for a while is Carl Brooks, the defensive tackle from Bowling Green. Comes from a smaller school, comes from a MAC, had the chance to see him up close in the MAC. He didn't get a combine invite, which I think is absolutely criminal after he had a pretty good Senior Bowl and a pretty productive career at Bowling Green. So I have no idea. We'll have to deal with the pro days, and we know sometimes the pro days numbers are a little bit fudged compared to what we would see from the combine. So that's kind of disappointing. But he had a really good Senior Bowl. This is a guy that was routinely playing under 300 pounds, has great strength and some surprising athleticism in there. But he came in a little over 300 pounds at the Senior Bowl, but still looked like the player who was on tape. And the thing I thought he was going to need the most was some size he's got the strength. He doesn't need to necessarily get a ton stronger, but to hold up in the interior, he was around like 280, 290 during the season is kind of where various places listed him as. He comes in at like a little bit over 300, 305, I think 303, 305 is where he came in, and he looked like the same player at the Senior Bowl. So it was confirmation to me that, hey, he can put on this size, still be that same player. And, which really sets him up a lot better in the NFL at that bigger size. So he's got to make a jump from the Mid-America Conference from the NFL, and that is probably why he goes day 3. I could see him sneak into the 3rd round. Him and I've got another player, an offensive lineman we're going to talk about that could sneak in the 3rd round, but I think these are still late round targets, late 3rd into day 3 for that. So what I wanted to talk about, I'm getting absolutely violent hands. I mean, Karl Brooks has some of the best hands in the interior that I've seen in this class. Just slapping. Looks like they're playing a little bit of patty cake. He just slaps offensive linemen's hands around, away from him, off of him, in a very effective way. And that bull rush, he just shoves linemen into the quarterback's lap. I think it's really crazy is that he has some really nice bend and burst. And they also played him outside as a stand-up linebacker, and stand-up rusher, and a hand in the dirt rusher, and we know how much Jim Schwartz can value some of those guys that can stand up and do some things like that. So I think Karl Brooks. I got his numbers over here. Last 2 seasons for Brooks, 17.5 sacks and 30.5 tackles for loss. It's going to be a big jump, like I said, from the Mid-American Conference to the NFL, but a highly productive player with some traits that you can't teach, coming to a situation where he can get some more refinement from a really good defensive line coach and Jim Schwartz and whoever he may bring in another name, and some now that the Chris Kiffin has moved on as of the recording of this. All right, so we will move on to a running back I like. Kendre Miller, the running back from TCU, I like him a lot. He's probably a 5th or 6th round prospect. He's not all that explosive. He doesn't have great run away from you speed in the open field, but he's really patient, and he has some Nick Chubb in his game in the sense that he's patient and has good vision. So he allows the play to develop in front of him, and he's like, okay, all right, we can stop here, cut back, go through there. He's got good balance control, good footwork. He just doesn't have home run speed. I don't think he can ever necessarily be a every down back in the NFL because he just doesn't have the ability to hit those home runs consistently because he just doesn't have breakaway from you speed. He's not slow, but I think he'd be a really good depth piece, losing like Dearness Johnson to come in as your 3rd back behind Jerome Ford and Nick Chubb. And I think that should he need to spot start in case of an injury, he can be one of those guys that gets you 60, 70, 80 yards, 60 to 80 yards if he on 15 carries if he needed it. He had a pretty productive career. I just don't see the explosion to take it to a really like game changer, and for that he falls to day 3. Okay, guys, moving right along. I got 2 names left for you. I'm going to start with Ryan Hayes, the offensive tackle from Michigan. I like this guy. He's a mammoth. I got to get 6'7", 307 pounds. I had it over to the side, make sure I pulled that up for you guys. He's enormous. And the best thing is he actually moves a lot better than you would think he would, just at that size. But he's a great run blocker. That's where it starts. And they are kind of moving more to a passing offense with Deshaun Watson and the evolution of the NFL. But this is a guy that definitely you can lean on in the 4th quarter to put a game away. His arm length, he doesn't have a lot. His arms are kind of shorter for a guy at that size. And when you play that big, you're talking about playing too high with your pad level, and your technique needs work. You got to stay low when you're 6'7", and he struggles to do that, which is why he's probably a 5th, 6th round prospect somewhere in there. I will say that he has played at several different positions, not just left tackle. So he could be the competition for Jed Wills or the backup plan if it doesn't go well with Jed Wills. But a guy that really needs to work on his technique more than anything because he has the physical tools and characteristics. He can come in here with one of the best technicians when it comes to offensive line play. Again, and Bill Callahan, I know I say this all the time, but that's who he is. His footwork needs work, but he's got plenty of experience and he's a very strong player. So the Browns have, especially in the interior, they have some very strong players in Bitonio and Teller, and they lean on some of them stronger players when it comes to the run game. He might be a guy that can be that very effective in the run game and some spot starts. Maybe they kick him into guard. I kind of doubt it at 6'7", but he's played around the line. We'll see, kind of where he goes. But this is interesting too, because I was bringing up his Draft Network profile because I really like the guys over at the Draft Network and what they do. And I scroll to the bottom. They say they believe he's an ideal guard. So that's very, very interesting. And they believe power gap, run oriented with play action RPO. We're going to see some play action RPO. So he could fit into the scheme here. That's what they believe he is best at. I really do like the Draft Network and what they say. So I think they got him as their 208th prospect overall. So and they graded him as a 4th round value. So I tend to line up with that thought as well, I think. Final guy I'll talk to you guys real quick here on this quick hitter on Wednesday is Nick Herbig, the linebacker / edge rusher from Wisconsin. I have seen Herbig's name quite a bit lately, just because he gives you something that you don't have necessarily in the traditional stand-up outside edge rusher that the Jim Schwartz kind of likes. I really like Herbig. Let me get you. I forgot to pull up his measurables for you guys. But Herbig, 6'2", 227. He's an outside linebacker that kind of is that stand-up TJ Watt style of rusher. I think he had 11 and a half sacks this year. He's hyper productive. Yeah, 11 sacks this year, 9 sacks last year. So you're looking at 20 sacks in his 2 seasons as a starter. Only played in 7 games as a freshman when he had 1 sack. 15 and a half tackles for loss this year. 14 and a half tackles for loss next year. The year before last. The thing that with Herbig, when I was watching some of this film, is I don't think he's really has any impact on the run game. Right now at 227, he needs some more strength, maybe some more size. Again, an NFL strength and conditioning program gives a lot of these players that little bit of a boost that they do need when they get to this level. When he disappears on film too routinely, I think he's just undersized. He's got to work on his technique. He has a good first step off the line of scrimmage. He uses his hands relatively well. They're just kind of inconsistent in how he utilizes them. I see a guy that you bring in, he becomes like the 5th edge on your roster who comes in when people are gassed or there's injuries. And I think he can give you, from that role, like 4 or 5 sacks a year, maybe, once he gets it. I'm going to bring up the Draft Networks and kind of see what they thought about it. Yeah, his production Oh, and his motor. Yeah, they brought it up, the hot motor. But he does a limited production in the NFL role. So yeah, they line up with me there. And they say, I just at 228, 6'2", he plays his heart out. Actually, not a terrible guy in coverage. I think he's not terrible in zone coverage, but I really would just have him as a situational pass rusher. And I don't think that, at least looking at his film right now, I'm not sure he ever becomes more than just a situational pass rusher. But he's got enough explosion athleticism off the line of scrimmage, a really nice first step. He does a pretty good job, a lot better than I expected in timing the snap count. Not a lot of penalties. I think there's some penalties there, but I think he kind of lines that stuff up, and he's a pretty smart player. I just think he's incredibly limited, so he falls there. But it's just one of those things where if you've already got, maybe you take edge in the 2nd round, or you sign a couple edge or something like that, and let's round out the position group in the 5th or 6th round. I think you can do it with Nick Herbig, and a ton of production in the Big Ten. That's the thing. We talked about Carl Brooks' production, how that is a really big plus for him. Coming from the MAC, he's got a ton of production in those 18 sacks in the last 2 seasons. So you look at that and you say, oh, I'm very interested in that sort of thing. I'll watch Herbig and see what he's got going on there. But in the end, a very limited player. All right, guys, that is it for today. I'll be back with another draft video this weekend going over a specific positional ranking. I think we're going to do safeties this weekend. I'm not sure who's going to join me for that quite yet, and when we're going to release it, but it'll probably be Friday or Saturday. You'll get another draft episode. So I really appreciate you guys. Most valuable thing, you can give somebody some of your time. So I appreciate you guys giving more of your time to us. I had a heck of a time talking to you about these prospects, like I always do. So I'll see you guys again next time. And as always, go Browns.